Derek, wake up! Do you know what day it is? Said Tina. I said while wiping the sleep from my eyes. It was my little sister Tina, who had started a birthday countdown. Every morning she'd jump on my stomach to tell me how many days were left until her big day. 3 more days until my birthday! I'm so excited, Derek! I can't wait to open my presents. I know you'll get me something nice because you're the best big brother in the world! She exclaimed. My baby sister is gonna be 6 years old, I replied while ruffling her hair and giving her a hug. I was smiling, but I felt terrible. We're not a wealthy family. In fact, it's the complete opposite. My mom works at a little bakery, and my dad was recently laid off, so we have very little. I was given an allowance once in a while, but I never had much to spend on anything. I wish I could take my sister to the toy store and just let her pick out anything she wanted. She was my only sibling, and as an older brother, I was very protective. I wanted only the best for her, but I had nothing. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen to see what was for breakfast. Boring oatmeal porridge again. Mom, I'm tired of this, I groaned. Honey, I'm tired of explaining to you that we can't afford to spend money on exciting breakfasts, she replied. Yes, son, you should be grateful that you at least have something to eat. Many people don't, my father said sternly. I sat down and ate quietly. It was true. While I didn't have much, there were still many who had less, and I guess I should be grateful. Yum, said Tina. She was adorable. She liked anything. After I finished breakfast, I took a shower and got ready for school. My parents chose to send me to a private school because they believed it was better. It was costing them an arm and a leg, but they decided our suffering would result in me landing a lucrative career, which would eventually make them proud. Anyway, it was good because at least I got to wear a uniform, so my classmates would never know that I only had 2 or 3 outfits. Still, it sucked to be the only poor person in the entire school. Almost everyone at that place lived in mansions and had practically everything. Then there was me, the guy with one uniform because my parents could only afford one. I wore the same one every day. That morning I was almost completely dressed when I realized I was missing a sock. I searched everywhere for it. It wasn't in the closet, on the chair near my desk, anywhere. My last resort was to check under the bed. As I knelt and peeped in the darkness, I noticed a crispy $50 bill on the floor next to an old shoebox. What? I thought. I've never been able to save that much my whole life, so where did this come from? I picked it up and without a second thought, I shoved it into my pocket. I was so excited that I ran out of the house and was just in time to catch the bus. Luckily, my pants were long enough to hide the fact that I was still missing a sock. My day was quite uncomfortable. Have you ever tried walking around with a missing sock? But I caught up with my best pal Miles at lunchtime. You're so irresponsible. Anyway, you're lucky my parents are strict and that all I have in my house are books and board games. Otherwise, we'd be in the same boat, I replied. One day that'll change. You're the smartest person in our year. I'm sure you'll be rich someday, he exclaimed. Speaking about rich, this morning I found a $50 bill under my bed. That was so weird, I told him. He began to laugh. Well, Derek, I think you should check under your bed every morning. Maybe soon you can actually buy me more games. I laughed too, and then the bell rang, so we both went to class. When I got home that afternoon, Tina came running towards me with her hands in the air. 2 more days until my birthday! Have you bought me my present? She screamed. What do you want, anyway? I asked. I want an LOL doll, 2 Barbie dolls, a stuffed unicorn. She went on and wouldn't stop. I ate my boring dinner, did my homework, showered, and went to sleep. The next morning, I realized I still hadn't found my sock. I remembered Miles's joke and looked under the bed again. There was $100 there. Even though he meant it as a joke, it was really there, and much more than yesterday. All I could think about was what I'd buy for Tina. Her birthday was the next day. I quickly put my money into my pocket and left for school. After school, I went to the toy store and bought everything I could for $150. I walked home with my bag of presents, feeling like the world's best big brother. When I got home, Tina ran towards me like she usually did. Derek, 1 more day until my She paused. Are these all presents for me? She squealed. Yes, but you can't open them until tomorrow, I replied. You're the best big brother ever, she said and ran to tell our parents. I went to my room to change and started on my homework. Suddenly, I heard a knock on my door. Derek? It was my mom. Yes, Mom? How did you buy all those presents for your sister? You aren't doing anything you shouldn't be, are you? She looked at me suspiciously. No, Mom, I've been saving for a very long time, I lied. Okay, well, I just wanted to say thanks. Your father and I were only able to afford a birthday card this time, and I was going to take one of the leftover cakes from the bakery after work. So we're very happy she has presents. I'm happy I raised such a responsible young man, she said proudly. She walked away, and I began to imagine what I would do if the money kept appearing under my bed. But who kept putting it there? Was this magic? I was very confused, but it was making my family happier, so I decided not to think about it too much. Before I left for school the next morning, I made sure I checked under the bed again. Believe it or not, there was $200 there. After that, every morning when I checked, the amount of money increased by $50 from the previous day. In what seemed like no time at all, I had saved $1,000. The money was always placed in the same spot under the bed, and I could still not figure out where it was coming from. One afternoon, I decided to talk to Miles about it. I explained the situation, and he looked puzzled for a while. Then he finally replied, "Dude, that's really weird. Anyway, we should spend some now. You deserve a few new things, then we can spend the rest at the arcade." I agreed, and later we had a great time. I bought myself some new outfits, uniforms, a backpack, shoes, and yes, lots of socks. After we spent a few hours at the arcade, Miles came up with an idea. "Hey, let's get some fake IDs and have some fun this weekend. There's this new club I want to check out," he said. I don't know if that's the best idea, but okay. How much is it going to cost?" I replied. I'd never done anything out of the ordinary like that before. About $50 each. You just need to send me a picture by tonight and we'll have them the next day," he said. I gave him the money and he smirked. The next day was Saturday. I looked under my bed again and there was more money. "Great," I exclaimed while I counted the hundreds. I put some away and put some in my wallet to spend at the club that night. Later I met Miles and he gave me my fake ID, which looked surprisingly real. I was now a 25-year-old man named Joseph. I laughed. "Okay, let's go have some fun," I said. "Yes, but before that, I have a surprise for you. We're waiting for 2 other people who will come with us," he said. "Huh?" I replied as I saw 2 of the most beautiful girls from our school approach us. "Here's your date, Derek. This is Stephanie. I'm sure you met before," Miles said. I had a crush on Stephanie since middle school, but she always ignored me. Tonight she was actually my date. I couldn't believe it. Stephanie looked gorgeous. She was wearing a purple mini dress and looked at me like she was actually excited. Hi," I said to her shyly. "Don't be shy with me. We're gonna have an amazing night," she replied. And that we had. My night was insane. We drank, danced, and partied like never before. Stephanie stayed by my side the entire time, and I was able to buy drinks for her and all of her friends. I felt like a real man. Here I was, outside partying and being able to buy my date anything she asked for. I don't remember anything else about that night, probably because I drank too much. On Monday morning, I was the talk of the school. Apparently I was so drunk that I ended up kissing Stephanie in the middle of the dance floor. Someone took a video and posted it on Instagram, and now everybody knew. It was the beginning of my new life. People actually knew who I was now. As the weeks went by, I became the most popular guy at school. I was dating the most beautiful girl, had the most expensive things, and so much money. Stephanie had become my world, even though she'd mostly talk to me when she wanted me to buy her something. She was just so irresistible, I did anything for her. My life was absolutely perfect. Until one morning. You ever wake up and just know that something bad was about to happen? Well, that was how I felt. I carried out my morning routine, and as usual, before I left the house, I looked under the bed. There was nothing there. Maybe the wind blew it away, I thought. I'll check again tomorrow. The next morning, there was no money again. The morning after that, there was no money. I tried to keep myself calm and went to school like nothing was wrong. I finally began to freak out after the 5th day. Had my luck just ended like that, with no warning? Instead of running for the bus that morning, I went to the living room and sat down with my head in my hands. "Derek, what's wrong?" my father asked as he came to sit next to me. "Everything. My life changed so much the past few weeks, and everything is going to suck again," I replied. "What on earth are you talking about?" he said. I told him about the money, the parties, Stephanie, my new popularity, and everything. He started to laugh. I couldn't believe it. I just spilled my heart out to this man, and he was just there laughing. "Well, son, there's something I should tell you," he finally replied. "What?" I said. "Your mother and I aren't poor. In fact, a few years before you were born, we inherited a great fortune. We chose to raise you and Tina like this because it'd teach you some important values, like honesty and generosity. I put the money under your bed every night to see how you'd behave when you had everything," he said. I was shocked. "In the beginning, you did well. You spent it all on your sister, but I don't know what got into you after that. You proved to me that you're not mature enough to handle any of this. Instead of saving or helping others, you chose to impress people and to become popular. You won't get another cent until you've left college, Derek. I'm sorry, he continued. I was in complete shock. Nothing made any sense. After that week, everything went back to the way it was before. Stephanie left me for some other guy, and the new friends I made wanted nothing to do with me because I was poor again.
"Jeeves, could you get me some soda?" I demanded from my butler. His name wasn't really Jeeves. I just called him that for fun. "Yes, sir," he replied. "Make me a sandwich while you're at it," I said. He nodded and left. Having people refer to me as sir made me feel quite important, especially since I was only in my last year of middle school. My parents owned several luxury hotels in the South Pacific, and in addition to that, my mom was the heir to a massive family fortune. If you want to have a massive fortune as well, let's get this video to 50,000 likes and everyone watching this video will be rich. Really? So I guess you could say I grew up like a prince. Servants pampered me and I had to do nothing for myself. My bedroom was the size of a middle-class family's house, and I'm not exaggerating. It had everything you could imagine. I had my own arcade, 2 televisions, a cotton candy machine, basketball court, jacuzzi, and a section I like to call the zoo. It wasn't a real zoo, of course, but it was where I kept my exotic pets. A squirrel monkey, royal python, Komodo dragon, and an ordinary poodle I called Frank. But apart from that, I was a regular kid. I liked video games, hanging out with my other rich friends, and playing sports, especially football. The best part of my life was that my parents weren't overbearing or controlling. They wanted me to grow up into a self-sufficient, independent person. That meant they pretty much let me do whatever I wanted. So I got to hang out with my friends and do whatever I felt like doing. One Saturday afternoon after football practice, I was walking around town with my friend Andy. We were feeling really hungry after a pretty intense practice session, so we decided to stop at a 7-Eleven and grab a snack. As I left the building with a Slurpee the size of my head, an old man bumped into my shoulder and half of my drink spilled onto the pavement. "Hey, watch it," I said angrily. "I'm sorry," he replied. I took a good look at him and realized that he was wearing dirty clothes and he looked like he hadn't showered in months. "I haven't eaten all day. Do you have $5 to spare?" he asked me. "Sure," I said while digging into my pocket. I handed him the money. "I don't have anything to eat tomorrow either. Do you have any more cash to spare?" he asked. I looked at Andy and we started laughing. "Look, old man, I already gave you $5. That's enough," I said. "You're a spoiled little brat and you will never understand what it's like to be a person like me, homeless and abandoned by everyone. You'll never know what it's like to have nothing," he screamed. As I sat alone in my room that night, I thought, my identity does not revolve around all this money. I'm pretty sure I'm strong enough to survive as a homeless person. Maybe I'll take this old man's words and use them as a challenge. I'm going to move away from my perfect life for a while. I just need a plan, I continued thinking. The next morning, I convinced my parents to send me to a private high school in France for 1 year. It was summer and I was supposed to be going to an elite high school nearby in a few weeks. I explained that moving to France would be better for my development and independence. I'd also learn a new language. They agreed right away, made the plans and bought the ticket. I couldn't believe how easy that was. In reality, I'd only be moving 2 towns away. I had already enrolled myself in a poorly funded high school there. When it was time to leave, I pretended that I was all packed and ready to go to my new school. My parents dropped me off at the airport, and as soon as they left, I took a bus to town. I found the old man I had bumped into a few weeks before and gave him my suitcase. "You can have all this stuff. I don't need it," I said, and I was left with 1 backpack and $50. I got onto another bus and embarked on my new journey as a homeless person. When I arrived at my stop, I got off the bus. Now what, I thought. I had no clue what I was supposed to be doing as a new homeless person, so I just walked around aimlessly for a few hours. I began to feel very tired and it started to get dark, so I decided to sit at a table outside a cafe. A waitress came up to me and said, "Sir, I'm sorry, but seats are reserved for paying customers only." I went in, bought a cup of hot chocolate, and went back outside. I only had $40 left. I don't know when it happened, but I fell asleep and was woken up hours later by the same waitress. "We're closing now. You have to leave," she said. I stood up, went across the street, and waited for them to pack up and leave. Afterwards, I went to sit on the floor in front of the cafe. I took out my phone and sent a message to my parents. "Hey, I've arrived safely. France is great so far. We're happy for you. Have fun," they replied. This became my daily habit. I'd walk around the town and I'd find different places to freshen up. Libraries, restaurants, anywhere. I begged strangers for money to buy food, and when it was time to sleep, I'd just settle in front of the cafe. I was grateful on my first day of school because it meant I'd get to take a break from the same old routine every day. The school looked like it was falling apart, and the students there were certainly not the crowd I was used to. I found my first class and sat down at the back. Pieces of the ceiling were falling off. There was terrible lighting, and the air conditioner didn't work. But those were the least of my worries. Everyone who walked in turned up their noses at me. "That guy smells like a garbage truck," said one of my classmates. He pointed to me while his friends gathered around him and laughed. The teachers were no better. They were mean, harsh, and they all looked like they hated their jobs. I was having the worst day ever. I sat in the cafeteria eating my lunch alone when a girl came and sat in front of me. "Hi, I'm Melody," she said. "I'm Eric," I replied, sort of embarrassed to be talking to a girl in my condition. "I've seen you some nights, sleeping outside on the street. Are you homeless? Where are your parents?" she asked. "My parents died in a car accident, so I'm pretty much alone," I lied. "Don't you have other relatives who could have taken you in?" she asked. "No," I replied. "I'm sorry to hear about that. I really am," she said. She looked really sincere. She slid a pink slip of paper into my hand and then she left. I opened it and it contained the directions to a homeless shelter. After school, I decided to head straight there as I was in desperate need of a shower. I also wanted to sleep in a real bed and maybe change my clothes. At least I'd be clean for school the next day. It took me a while to find the shelter, but when I did, I knocked on the door and a kind old lady opened it. "Hello, can I help you?" she asked. "Is this the homeless shelter? I was wondering if I could stay tonight," I asked. "I'm sorry, but we're full tonight. Try coming back tomorrow," she replied. Suddenly, I saw Melody appear behind her. What was she doing here? "Marcia, it's okay," she said to the woman. "Don't worry, Eric. You can stay in my room tonight. I'll sleep on the couch," she said. The old lady signaled for me to come in, and I heaved a sigh of relief. "Melody, are you—" But before I could finish, she explained. "I'm homeless too. I live here sometimes with my mom. This has been my life for the past 10 years. We once had a happy home, but one day my father left and never came back. My mom couldn't afford the rent on her own, so we were forced to live on the streets. Until we found this place," she said. I felt really bad that people actually had to endure this. For me, this was just an experiment, but for her, it was reality. As the weeks went by, I made a deal with the owner of the home, Marcia. I could stay as long as I helped out around the home. She taught me how to cook, and before I knew it, preparing breakfast and dinner were my responsibilities. It was hilarious at first because I didn't even know how to use a stove. I was also responsible for cleaning the bathrooms. This drove Marcia crazy at first because I had no idea what I was doing. I never did my own cleaning at home. Melody and I got closer as time went by. We'd sit next to each other at school and we'd spend almost every minute together. She was funny, kind, and very generous. She had a really beautiful heart, and before I knew it, I was in love. When I expressed my feelings to her, she told me that she felt the same way, and that was the beginning of my first relationship. But the reality hung over my head. Soon, my 1-year experiment would be over, and I'd have to tell her the truth. She had really fallen in love with a fraud, as she knew almost nothing about the real me. My problems increased when old Marcia sat with me one evening and said she had something serious to discuss with me. "Eric, I'm happy you've come to stay here at the shelter and that I've been able to help you. You're continuing to grow into a remarkable young man, and I'm very proud of you. But I'm still sad that you are without a real family. And, well, I was wondering, how would you feel if I became your adoptive mother?" she said. I was speechless. I mean, I know I could never replace your biological mother, but I'd hate to think of you going through this life all alone. I just want you to know that I will always be here for you no matter what, she said. I decided that I'd have to tell her the truth now. I held her hands and thanked her for being so kind and supportive. Then I told her everything. Who I really was, where I came from, the fact that I had millions and that this was only an experiment. I was so engrossed in my story that I didn't even realize that Melody was standing right behind us. When I noticed her, it was too late. She ran to her room upstairs and I quickly followed. "Melody, listen, I'm so sorry," I said. "I can't believe you lied to me. Nothing I know about you is true," she said. "What is true is how I feel about you. I never expected to come here, to meet you, to end up like this. But all I know is that I really care about you, and I'd never, ever want to leave your side, even if it meant staying here forever. I don't need those millions like I need you," I said as I held her hands while looking into her eyes. Melody eventually forgave me. My next hurdle was explaining the truth to my parents. They were surprised when I showed up suddenly with Melody and her mom by my side. I explained the nature of my experiment, and they were actually proud of me. My parents bought Melody and her mom a house close to ours and decided to fund Melody's entire education. She wouldn't have to go to that awful school anymore. On weekends, we'd still go to volunteer at the homeless shelter. My parents also donated a large sum of money, which helped the shelter to expand and house more people. Pretending to be homeless taught me that we all need each other to survive in this world, and that if we can help another person, we should. I had been working in a garage for 2 years. It didn't pay much, just the food money, but that job was all I had, and I had got it after a lot of struggles, so I put up with it. I was just 18 at that time, and 2 years before that, I had run from my last foster home because the people who took me in were the worst kind of people. They didn't take care of me or any other children in the house and made us all do the heavy chores of the house. It was clear that they only did the fostering job for the money, so I had no choice but to run away. And ever since, I had been working hard to make it every other day with that job, and I was grateful. However, my life was not always like that. Not when my parents were still alive. But before we move on, like this video, hit that subscribe button and activate the notification bell, and you will get $1,000 in the next 9 hours. Trust me, it works. I was such a happy child, especially because my parents took such good care of me. We lived in a small house, but they still gave me everything I needed and asked for. My dad would always ask me to help him around with cars he brought home to fix, which was more looking at what he does than helping, but we got to spend time together that way. But everything changed one day when I was 9. I was in my school waiting for my parents to pick me up, but they never came. Instead, some police officers came and took me in their car and explained to me how their car was in an accident and they were never coming back. I cried so much that day. Ever since then, I had been in the foster care system, going from home to home since I had no relatives or family after my parents, so the rough times of my life began. And so did my sad life story, and it didn't get any better afterward. It was definitely good to not have to put up with the mean foster parents, but life was still tough for me after I ran away. I went from place to place looking for a job to earn money, but no one was open to giving me one. "You're too young," they would say, or "you don't have the skills," which I didn't because I never focused to be good at anything after my parents passed away. But my dad had left me with some skills when we spent time together fixing cars, and that was how I got the job at the garage. They didn't pay much because they couldn't afford a new worker themselves, but they saw me in need, so they gave me the job. Otherwise, I would have still been sleeping on the park bench like I did for so many nights. Later, after getting the job, I got a very small apartment on a rent-sharing basis with a guy, John. And let me tell you, he was the worst roommate ever. He made me do all the washing and cleaning around the house after my long day at work. And I did it thinking maybe if I did all his work, he wouldn't mind if I'm a little late on my share of rent. But instead, he kicked me out. "If you can't pay, there's plenty of room on the streets," he said before throwing out my stuff, which was not a lot. After that, I went to the only place that took me in, the garage. The daughter of the garage owner, Sheila, who was just my age, had been friends with me since I had joined. She convinced her father to let me stay in the small room in the storage area of the garage, and he did. Sometimes she would give me some extra money from her savings so that I could have a decent lunch. "I would give you more if I had it, Aaron," she would say, and I knew that she was the kindest person ever. So, like that, I started living in the garage, and it was fun working there as most of the guys that worked with me were just around my age. However, I didn't have the means and liberty to enjoy the things they enjoyed doing because they had their parents to support them even if the job paid less. so I always had to reject them when they would ask me to come to a party with them, as I couldn't afford to waste a second of my time. But one day, I decided to take a break and go to the party with them for a change. So I went to the party with the boys, and it was a new experience for me, which was fun. I even met a girl, Gina, who seemed very interested in me, so we exchanged numbers and got on talking. After hearing my entire story, she just said, "Wait, you live in a garage?" "I work there during the day and sleep there, so yeah," I replied. "So you're poor?" she asked again. "Yeah," I replied, and without saying anything, she just left and went on to talk to other guys. But just before I left the party, she came to me and said, "Please don't text or call the number I gave you. It'd be much better if you delete it," and left. After that, I never went to such parties. They really were a waste of time. So days passed like that, and there were tough times, and Sheila was my one true friend who was with me all through those times. Suddenly, after 2.5 years of running away from my last foster home, something happened. My mean foster parents showed up at the garage out of nowhere. They told me that they were looking for me, and they were so glad that they had finally found me. "We have been looking for you ever since you left," the mean foster mom said, and they both were acting weird as if they actually loved and cared about me. But I immediately knew that they were just putting up a show. However, I couldn't figure out the reason why they were doing all that. They even asked and begged me to go with them, but I shut them up and sent them away, saying I would never go with them. Later that day, I suddenly got a call from an unknown number. So I picked it up and asked who it was. And guess who it was? It was Gina, that girl from the party. I had deleted her number that day, so I didn't have her in my contacts. I had not expected that she would call me out of nowhere, but that was not even the surprising part. It was later when she asked to meet me for a date, but I rejected the offer like she had rejected me before. What an unusual and amusing day, I thought, and got back to work, but little did I know, it was just getting started. Again, after some time, my previous roommate John visited me, and he apologized for how he treated me a few years back, and even offered me a place to stay. But I was done with him too, so I sent him away as well. After that, I couldn't focus on my work as I was left wondering why all of a sudden all the people who had ever done me wrong in the past were acting all nice and trying to win me over. It didn't make sense to me at all. In fact, it was weird. But right then, Sheila came to the rescue. She called me and asked me to meet her at her house right away as she had something urgent to show me. So I left all my work and rushed there. When I reached her house, she showed me something that confused and shocked me. She turned the TV on and there was a picture of me from a few years back, and a man was explaining how if anyone was to find me, they were getting a huge sum of money as a reward. "Now I get it," I said. "What?" Sheila asked. "Today was so weird. All the people that had done me wrong in the past called me or came to meet me. It was all for the money," I told her. "We should call him and ask him what this is all about," Sheila suggested, so we called him. On the phone, the man was so happy to hear from me and asked me to meet him instantly. So Sheila and I took a road trip to the town where I was born to meet the man. Throughout the drive, I was confused and clueless about why the man wanted to see me. But we finally reached him, and the man turned out to be my family lawyer. "Aaron, I'm so sorry for the loss of your parents. I'm here to give you access to their will, now that you're 18, he said as he sat us down. "Will?" I asked as I was confused. I had never thought about it. "Your parents wanted to raise you to be humble and kind and understand the hardships of less fortunate families. So while they raised you, they didn't show off as rich," he said. He told me that they were going to let me know about our wealth when I turn 18, but then the accident took them away. After that, he was bound by their wishes to let me know about the money only after I turned 18. "They were good people, and they wanted to make you just like them," he continued. He also told me that he was keeping track of the foster homes I was in, but later he started getting busy and assumed I must have been in a good home, so he stopped checking. It was only later that he went to see me in my last foster home 6 months back. He found out that I had run away. So he tried to find me, but couldn't. So he went to the TV to find me as a last resort. But then Sheila asked the lawyer, "So how much money does he have exactly?" The lawyer smiled and said, "Millions." I couldn't believe what I just heard, so I asked again, "Millions?" "That's right, son. You're a millionaire," he said, and congratulated me. Sheila was also very happy for me. But I got so emotional that I wanted to cry. Just a moment before that, I couldn't even afford a room to live in. And suddenly, I had the money to buy 10 houses if I wanted. I felt so grateful towards my parents and my true friends that I couldn't hold back my emotions. So I hugged Sheila and cried. The news traveled fast, and all of a sudden, I was on the news and papers with a title like, "Guy was a millionaire for years but had no idea." I was approached by many shows and channels to give them an interview about my story, but I didn't like that kind of publicity, so I rejected their offers. Gold diggers like Gina were always on my tail and kept on calling and texting me, so I changed my number. With millions in hand, I wanted to make a difference. So first, I invested in the garage that gave me a job and a place to stay when I had nothing. After that, I started a business of my own and started training and hiring people in need just like I had needed 2 years back. I knew what it was like to struggle, so I wanted to help them out. After that, I did something I didn't have the courage to do. I asked Sheila out. She was so happy when I brought that up. "I waited for 2 years. I had thought you would never ask," she said and hugged me. I took her to a fancy restaurant and we had the best dinner. I felt like I could finally give her everything she deserved. Then, a couple of months later, we moved in together. I was so happy helping out the people in need, and she was still beside me, helping me in any way she could, just like she did when I had nothing. Thanks for watching. Have you ever learned a secret about yourself that you didn't know before? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos on the channel.
As soon as I woke up, I got out of bed and did my morning stretches. I squeezed a quick 10 minutes of cardio in before taking a shower and getting ready for school. As usual, I yelled at the cook a little because he got my omelet wrong again. That part of my morning was always so relaxing. I drove to school in my red sports car and parked in my usual spot. The valet was already waiting for me, as I requested. My school was very prestigious and very expensive, of course. Only the elite studied here. It was a parade of designer bags and expensive watches. It was heaven. I saw my boyfriend, Aiden, further down the hallway talking to his friends. I snuck up behind him and put his arm around my shoulders. "Hey, gorgeous," he said with that pearly white smile. "Hi," I replied with an enormous grin on my face, as always. From behind, I felt someone bump into me and drop something. Furious, I turned around and saw a mousy little substitute teacher fixing her glasses and dipping to pick up her books from the floor. "Watch it," I shouted at her, and I kicked one of her books across the hall. I grabbed Aiden's arm and dragged him away from there. I found an empty classroom, so I pushed him in there and closed the door behind us. "We're not supposed to be in here," he said, being the goody two-shoes he always was. "So? What are they gonna do?" I replied. I sat down on the teacher's desk and crossed my one leg over the other. I also undid the tie of my uniform a bit. The uniforms were cute, but very uncomfortable. "Aiden?" I asked with a flirtatious smile. "Sophia?" he asked back. "Where are you taking me for our anniversary?" I threw him a sheepish grin and could hardly contain my excitement. It was our 5-year anniversary. We had dated since we were kids. Our families were very close ever since we were in kindergarten together. My mom even told me Aiden's mom found him looking at engagement rings. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to plan something better than whatever you've got planned inside your head?" he asked me with a jokingly exhausted tone. "Of course I do. Why do you think I was so disappointed last time I threw myself a birthday party? But you always outdo my expectations. So where are we going this year, Bunny?" "You'll just have to wait and see," he winked. I was about to reply to him, but a rude teacher interrupted us, so we had to leave the classroom. I didn't want to, and I didn't have to, but Aiden hated breaking rules. A few days later, we were sitting at the best table of the newest and most exclusive restaurant in the city. Almost everyone was turned away when they asked for a table, even elites like Aiden and I, but somehow we got a table, and the best table in the house nonetheless. "You really outdid yourself this year," I said, smiling ear to ear at him and looking over the menu. "Only the best for you, as always, Soph." He smiled back at me. A waiter approached us, asking Aiden directly what we would like to start with. He ordered our food, the most expensive dishes of course, and the waiter left. Aiden and I spent the evening gushing over each other, as we always did, and thinking about the years we spent together and how much we had been through together. He had just finished dessert, which was a delicious and sweet chocolate lava cake, when I saw Aiden start to stand up and reach into his pocket for something that looked like a small box. I couldn't help myself, so I stood up and shouted, "Yes!" But just as I did, the waiter was retrieving our plates from the table, which I knocked over with my hands, and my plate felt right on my chest. I looked in horror at my favorite dress, stained with molten chocolate all over the front. "Shoot," Aiden said, reaching over with a napkin to try and wipe the chocolate off. "What kind of waiter are you?" I yelled at our little waiter. "You're pathetic. I'll have you fired. Do you know who my parents are? I could get you thrown in jail with a single phone call." I continued shouting as our waiter shrunk. Aiden looked at me in a way he had never looked before and put the box back in his pocket. He quickly slipped the waiter a $20 bill and said he had prepaid the meal. He grabbed my wrist and we left the restaurant. I was in tears looking at my favorite dress completely ruined. I heard the doorbell ring as I finished getting ready for the biggest event of the year. The ball was finally here. I waited for my parents to open the front door and to hear Aiden's voice before I started walking down the stairs. The trail of my dress followed me down the stairs like a waterfall. My mom took hundreds of pictures of me. Aiden was wearing a new suit, and my parents were also dressed up. Aiden grabbed my hand, but didn't compliment me on how beautiful I looked or on my dress. He only gave me a polite-looking smile and led me towards the limousine parked outside. We arrived at the country club shortly, where we knew every single person, or at least those that mattered. We were surrounded by men in expensive suits like Aiden's and women in gorgeous gowns like mine, but not exactly as beautiful. An enormous sign hung over the entrance of the main building. There was a spotlight on it. It read, "Annual Debutante Ball." Our community loved keeping old traditions alive, the debutante ball being the most important. It was really just an excuse for us young ladies to get up on a stage and have people throw roses at us and take pictures of us. The main event, which was the catwalk, was followed by a buffet. I was wearing a tiara and surrounded by people, but Aiden was the only one I wanted next to me. A waitress walked in front of me, and all the men's heads turned towards her. I felt a twinge of jealousy in the pit of my stomach. I excused myself from the crowd and sort of followed her. I watched from afar as she smiled at everyone. A big, bright smile coated in red lipstick. Tacky, in my opinion, but all the men seemed to buy it. They were giving her extra tips for every little thing she did, like handing them a drink. I was angry that a waitress was getting more attention than us, the debutantes. The ones this event was for. What was it about that girl? Her black apron was dirty, her shirt buttoned up all the way, her hair in a messy ponytail. She looked like a disaster. Then I saw Aiden. He saw her and smiled at her. He barely smiled at me when he saw me in my gown, but now he was smiling at a waitress. My blood boiled. I saw she was headed towards the pool to keep handing out the hors d'oeuvres, so I followed her. As soon as I had the opportunity, I stuck my heels out and made her trip. I merely wanted her to fall and spill the drinks she was carrying, but she slipped and fell into the pool. She screamed and everyone turned towards her to see what had happened, but she wasn't properly coming up from the bottom of the pool. "Help!" she managed to shout. "I can't swim!" I saw someone running from the corner of my eye and swiftly jump into the pool. They both emerged from the pool dripping water, and I saw that it was Aiden who jumped in to save her. He was carrying her in his arms. I wanted to shout at him to drop her, but I didn't want to make a fool out of myself. The scowl on my face grew deeper as I watched my boyfriend carry some common waitress back inside through the kitchen doors. I couldn't take it anymore. I was upset. He should have been with me all night, but instead he was off somewhere else, and now he was getting all close to a waitress. I stormed off in a rage towards the limousine and yelled at the driver to take me home. My face was pouting and my arms were crossed the entire way home. A few months after the ball, I hadn't quite forgiven Aiden for ditching me, but he seemed mad at me too. He suddenly treated me differently. He stopped gifting me flowers and purses. He stopped getting me my favorite chocolates. Whenever he took me out, it was always to some regular restaurant, never to the expensive ones we frequented. He gave me stuff from time to time, but it was always pretty cheap stuff like a teddy bear, instead of what he usually gave me, a necklace for example, or a bracelet. I tried to look happy whenever he gave me a present, but I couldn't help frowning, and in return, he looked disappointed, but in me, not in himself. I didn't understand why he had suddenly become so cheap. He even started dressing differently. He switched his expensive shoes for regular sneakers and stopped wearing nice brands of clothing, opting instead for basic clothes like jeans and a t-shirt. I tried everything I could think of to bring back the spark in our relationship, even a weekend trip to Paris, but nothing worked. He always looked indifferent when he looked at me. I didn't know if I had done anything wrong or if it was him, but I needed to fix this. He was my future husband. Everyone expected us to get married eventually. I finally came up with an idea to bring the spark back. He needed to see me at my best, as the center of attention. After a week of begging, my dad finally agreed to throw me a party for my birthday. It was going to be perfect. I bought an incredibly expensive and beautiful dress, gorgeous enough to put all the dresses at the debutante ball to absolute shame. It was puffy and silky and fit me like a glove. I looked like a princess in it. The day of my party finally arrived. Our mansion looked like a castle. It was full of flowers and lights, and it smelled like delicious pastries. My dad had red carpets put on every floor, floor, so it really did feel like a castle. I got ready upstairs, where I slipped into my gown and decorated my neck with a brilliant diamond necklace that my grandma gifted me. As I looked in the mirror, I felt in my heart that there was no way Aiden could keep being cold and distant, seeing me dressed so beautifully, like an angel in comparison to the rest. As my guests arrived, my parents directed them towards the bottom of the enormous staircase. As I descended, I enjoyed the sound of people gasping as they saw me, and the compliments they gave my parents regarding my appearance. The best part of it, though, was Aiden. He was standing on the last step of the staircase, ready for me to hold his arm so he could lead me to the ballroom. "You look beautiful," he whispered in my ear. I smiled to myself because he finally came back to me. We danced several times, being the most handsome couple at the party. I felt as if we were dancing on a cloud. After a few songs, Aiden disappeared. I looked for him, pretending to be nonchalant so people wouldn't think he stood me up on my own birthday. But there was panic in my eyes. I couldn't find him anywhere. Not dancing, not eating, not chatting. He was nowhere to be seen. When I finally thought of checking the last place where he should be, I busted through the kitchen doors, and there he was. My boyfriend was leaning on the wall in the smelly kitchen, and he was chatting with some girl. The look on his eyes that was once directed at me, a look of affection and amusement, it was now directed at a waitress. Those angel eyes of his looked at her like she was his world. Aiden spotted me, and his eyes grew wide. The girl also turned around, and to my surprise, I saw the girl I had tripped into a pool a few months ago. I gasped and ran out of the kitchen. "Sophia!" I heard Aiden shouting behind me. I ran through the party and out into the garden. "Sophia, wait!" Aiden was running after me. I finally collapsed onto a bench, surrounded by roses in bloom. "Aiden, how could you?" I gasped between sobs. "It's my birthday, and you're off talking to some waitress?" I shouted. "Sophia, don't act like you didn't see this coming," he said coldly. "What else could I possibly do? She's not just a waitress. She has a name. It's Natalia. And she's the most amazing girl I've ever met," he continued. "Is this why you don't spoil me as you used to? You spend your money on some gold digger now?" I cried. "Yes, I do spend my money on her and on dozens of other people because she opened my eyes. You're dressed like a princess, spending daddy's money left and right on a party which won't last more than one night, while others are working 3 jobs just to keep their kids in school," he shouted at me. "Well, how is this my fault?" I sobbed. "It's not, but the least you can do is be empathetic. The most you can do is help, which is what I do now. I'm in love with her because she's the opposite of you, Sophia." He looked at me with a complete lack of emotion. "We're done," was the last thing he said as he walked out of my life. Suddenly, the red in my as he walked out of my life. The necklace around my neck seemed to suffocate me, so I yanked it off and threw it on the ground as I continued crying from my broken heart.
My family will only talk to me if I send them money. I dreamed that I was flying like an eagle high above the mountains. I felt free and powerful. It was the best feeling I had ever felt, until I was woken up by my phone's message tone. When I opened my eyes, I realized just how much pain I was in. Everything hurt. I was hurt in places where I didn't even know I had places. My ribs were the worst. When I finally reached down, I saw that I had several missed text messages from my brother Paul and my half-sister Suzanne. I could practically hear their voices in my head as I read. I saw my older brother Paul's first. "Hey, you bag of butt cracks. Don't forget to put the money in our accounts by 5 p.m. today. Dad almost blew a gasket when it went in at 5:15 p.m. last month." Paul was the favorite and firstborn son. My dad took him when he walked out on my mom, and when I was 4 and Paul was 8, Dad said it was because he was more self-reliant. Then I read my half-sister Suzanne's. "Daddy wanted to let you know that he will cancel the party if you're late again." I heard her condescending voice as I read it. To be fair, she spoke to everyone that way except for her daddy. That one time I was late, when I was stuck underground on the subway thanks to an overenthusiastic duck. Right, I thought to myself as I slowly got out of bed and made my way to the shower. As I passed by my face in the mirror, I noticed how beat up I was, but didn't give it a second look. The hot water felt amazing. When I was 11, my mother suddenly passed away. With no other family, my dad and his new wife had to take me in. They gave me a small room in the basement, a list of my share of the chores. Beyond that, I had to fend for myself with my brother and my 3 half-siblings. The oldest, Suzanne, Paul, middle son, who's about a year younger than me, and Lena, the baby of the brood, who just turned 17. The fact Suzanne was a year older than my older brother Rick was never lost on me. I got a job when I was 14 and saved up until I had saved enough to move out. Just as I was leaving their house for the last time, they presented me with a bill. That's not a joke. My family wanted me to pay them back for everything. How much I owed for back rent, to how much time my father and stepmother helped me with my homework, to how much I owed my other siblings for watching me when my parents were out, and so on. Even my younger half-siblings gave me a bill for the amount of attention they no longer got from our parents since I moved in. My stepmother made it very clear when I moved out. I'll never forget her message. Unless I pay back every dime I owe, they will all turn their backs on me for good. After I was dressed and ready to leave for work, I heard a knock on the door to my apartment. Wow, Wyatt, you look like shit. I wonder what the other guy looks like. Those words came from my neighbor, coworker, and my most recent cage-fighting opponent, Henry. I couldn't help but chuckle as his face looked almost as bad as mine while he handed me coffee. Several years older than me, he was the closest thing I had to an actual brother. He kind of took me under his wing shortly after I started my job at the firm a few years ago. Because it doesn't pay quite as much as my family wants, I started cage fighting in an amateur league. As we made our way to the subway, Henry explained that, dude, you gotta learn to protect the body. Take away the body, take away the fight. Chance a win. My mind drifted to last night's fight and the feeling of his shin connecting with my ribs in a devastating kick. I may have screamed on impact because I went down. Don't worry, man. I won't tell anyone that you screamed like a little girl before you hit the mat. I promise. I heard him say in my mind. So, it was a war cry, not a scream. I'm sorry if I scared you, I shot back. Don't worry, he said. I'm not going to tell anyone at the office. He was texting when he said it, and I'm sure he was telling everyone. On the subway ride, I told him about the situation with my family, including today's news that they were threatening to not invite me to my own birthday party. That they expected me to fund them with money that no doubt will not be spent on me. The worst part is my older brother and sister and I were all really kind of close at first. But when I missed a payment earlier, they turned on me. I almost couldn't believe the words coming out of my own mouth. He listened patiently between subway stops. In his usual bluntness, he gave me some sage wisdom. The hell with them. They sound like jerks. Spend the money on yourself for once, man. They were my only blood. I couldn't just walk away even if I didn't even like them anymore. The hour-long trip to work felt twice as long because of how much pain I was in. If Henry was in near as much pain as me, he sure didn't show it. We got to the office right on time, by which I mean we were right on time for our boss to catch us running late. This could have gone a few different ways. What the hell happened to you two? Were the first words out of the mouth of our boss, Mr. Gorsh, a balding man in his 40s, and wire-framed glasses as he looked at Henry and me. What can I say? We were both really determined to get the last chocolate donut on the way to work, was the only thing I could think of, followed immediately by Henry, who said, in our defense, people say those donuts are a real scream. And my ribs and pride now both hurt. Our boss shook his head and told us the next time we were late, we'll get written up. Thankfully, I was busy enough that my day went really quickly, despite the pain. A lot more of my colleagues asked me which one of the Scream movies was my favorite throughout the day, as opposed to the 0 times I've been asked that before. I was filling reports, writing reports, and photocopying reports all day. My ribs hurt so bad I skipped my lunch. The clock on my phone said 4:59 p.m. I watched the seconds tick down on the clock by my desk. Not just waiting to clock out, mind you. I made sure all the money was transferred at exactly 1 second before it was 5 p.m. My only silent F-U victory. Within seconds, I got a text from Lena with a photo of a chocolate cake and a message that read, "Hope to see you soon." I rolled my eyes before making my way to the office door where Henry was already waiting for me. As I did, one of my coworkers slapped me on the back and said, "Look out, war crier," as he passed me. I paused for a second, then kept moving. Hey, Henry, did you tell anyone in the office about my war cry? You mean your scream? No one, not at all, he replied. As if on cue, Brenda, gorgeous, the girl of my dreams, who works in our office, passed by us and said, "Good night, Henry, and you too, Wyatt. Don't make the girls scream too much." I turned to Henry. You were saying, Henry? Oh, you meant our office? He replied. Our office, yes, I shot back. Then everyone, yes, I told everyone. I think some people on the 2nd and 3rd floors know, actually. Gotta block that body, man. Next time, this won't happen. he said to me as we made our way down the busy street to the subway. Seriously though, Wyatt, your striking is getting better. Your ground game is solid. Your main weakness is you forget about defense. The better the defense, the better the odds of a victory, said Henry. Next time, I'll beat you, I said. His only response was a quick wink and a shake of his head. By the time we got to the station, we got on different trains. It took a few buses and another hour or so before I was finally at the family home on the edge of town. It was a nice house once that had seen better days. They were not neglected as much as just worn by age and use. When I arrived, I only found Lena and Rick, a single piece of cake and no gifts. Lena was too busy FaceTiming with her boyfriend in Canada to give me more than a passing, "Hello, happy birthday, bye now," after she opened the door for me. I found Rick in the backyard, laying on a lawn chair with a drink in his hand. "Hey," I called out to him as I walked into the yard. "Hey there, birthday boy," he said back to me as he lifted his head. "Welcome to your party." He had a sneer on his face that I just wanted to knock off. "Some party? Where is everyone? I sent the money on time." "Oh, no, I know," he said back. "You just missed everyone." By which he meant stepmommy and my father left for a trip to the Bahamas for a week that morning. Paul was at his girlfriend's house, and Suzanne, well, I stopped paying attention when he mentioned her because I don't care where the hell she is, to be honest with you. I thought about leaving for a second. I thought about kicking my older brother's ass. Even with feeling like I had a building fall on me, I was pretty sure that I could. Instead, I sat down in the lawn chair near Rick and pulled a drink out of his cooler. He lifted his head and said to me, "That's $10, bro." I just stared at him for a long second before he finally relented. "Okay, but only because it's your damn birthday. But you only get the one. I have to ration these until I go to the store tomorrow." I opened my drink and looked up at the sky. We sat in silence for a minute. My mind wandered. Suddenly, Rick and I were in the ring facing off with each other. He threw a punch but missed my head. Then another also missed. He went to throw a third, but I caught him square on the chin with a punch of my own. He was staggered, and there were actual stars floating around his head. He put his hands up to defend his face, but I kicked him hard in the ribs with a left kick. His whole body shifted to one side as I connected. My daydream was broken by Henry's voice. "Hello, Earth to Whining Wyatt." I said, "How much longer are you going to be staying?" "I don't know," I said. "Don't you have to get up early for work?" He scoffed at me. He was right to. My work and wounds paid for this lifestyle. I took a long sip of my drink. "You know, Rick, I never wanted us to be enemies. You're the only real family I have. I didn't have a choice in how things worked out. I just wish we could be a proper family." His reply came in the form of a loud belch. I put down my drink and headed for the bus stop, thinking of my multi-hour trip home. As I waited for the bus, I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Henry. "What do you say we do a long weekend in Vegas next month?" Almost instantly, I got a reply from him saying one word: "Finally." This so-called excuse for a family isn't worth the money anymore. What they didn't know was the plan that I had made. I picked up my phone and called my bank. "Hello, I'd like to report fraud on my account. Several transactions." "Of course, sir. As a platinum customer, we will return any money to your account that was taken because of fraud. Now, it says here you are a cage fighter?" "Yes," I said with a grin, as I thought of the new life I was going to live. "Yes, and I live in Vegas." This was going to be great.
Hi, my name is Alex, and this is the story of how I made $100 million when I turned 13. You see, my parents were really rich. They owned a lot of successful companies and made millions every single month. Though they had more than enough money to buy me anything I wanted, they were usually really cheap when it came to my requests. Sure, I had new clothes, and I really didn't lack the essentials, but they never let me buy anything extravagant. I understand that they wanted to teach me the value of money, but it still really annoyed me. I kept asking for nice gifts, and they always said no, except for Christmas and my birthday. At school, I was always really popular. Kids wanted to be around me, and I had a great time in class. I got great grades, and all my teachers seemed to really like me. My classmates wanted to ride with me in the amazing car my dad had bought for me. I was really young, so you can imagine I didn't drive it. I had a personal driver to make sure I got around safely. Now I realize that those kids liked me because of my dad's money. But I didn't really mind back then. It was nice to be so popular, and always have people waiting to spend time with me. I felt so important. One day, though, everything changed. I arrived home after school and was surprised to see Mom already waiting for me in the living room. She usually had a busy schedule, and I spent a few hours with my nanny before she arrived. Mom gave me this quiet look, and I immediately knew something was wrong. She hugged me tightly and told me that my dad had passed away earlier that day. I was stunned. Dad had shared breakfast with me that morning, and everything seemed normal. I asked what happened, and she told me it was his heart. There was nothing the doctors could do. I was heartbroken. I love my dad dearly, and he was a great man. He didn't deserve to pass away so soon. I missed a whole week of school, but eventually Mom convinced me I had to keep going and move on. It was hard, but I tried my best to put on a brave face. About a month after Dad died, I was informed about his will. Mom, of course, got a sizable part, but I was the main heir. I didn't fully understand what that meant until the lawyer and my mom walked me through the details. Dad had created a trust fund for me in case of his death. This included all his properties except our main house and a cottage in the mountains my mom inherited. But there was so much more. The yacht, the private plane, and his whole collection of ancient coins. The biggest surprise, though, was the bank account. It had more than $100 million in it. I was shocked and asked my mom if all of it was true. She told me it was, and that I deserved it as his son. I asked Mom what would happen to her. She hugged me and thanked me for being so sweet. She explained there was nothing I should worry about. She was still the main shareholder in all Dad's companies, and she had more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of her life. Dad would never leave her without a penny. I couldn't fully comprehend the sheer amount of money and properties I had inherited just a few days after my 13th birthday. It was heartbreaking to have lost my dad, but I was now a multi-millionaire. I didn't get all that money at once, of course. After all, I was just 13. I got a stipend of $1 million a year and would get the rest when I turned 18. It was still an insane amount for a teenager, and I began spending a lot of money on silly things. My mom recommended I keep quiet about my inheritance, but I was so foolish I didn't listen. My friends began asking for loans, and worse still, so did my family. Not Mom, of course, but my cousins and uncles. They weren't so well off, and I wanted to help them. What I didn't realize was that they were taking advantage of me. It wasn't as if they really needed money for an emergency. They kept asking for $50,000, and then a few months later, begged for more. It seemed like they saw me as their piggy bank. At first, I was too young to understand I was getting taken advantage of, but when I turned 16, I began to comprehend something was fishy about all the sob stories they told me. When I turned 17 and entered my senior year of high school, I finally told my mom about all the loans and gifts I had given over the years. She was so angry. She had a talk with all of my family and forbade them from ever asking for anything from me again. Mom began giving me investment tips and had a long talk with me about not letting people take advantage of my kindness. My mom and I are closer than ever now, and I'm very thankful that she stands up for me whenever I need it. But now I'm a few months away from my 18th birthday, and I'm so nervous. So far, I bought a lot of silly stuff and have everything I could possibly want, but I'm about to get my entire inheritance, and it's so much money. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with my big payday. I'm thinking about donating a portion to charity so that people who aren't as lucky can get back on their feet. But what should I do next? Buy an apartment? Pay for college? Buy an island? Make investments? I'm honestly not sure. I need some advice. What would you do with this money? Please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the other videos on the channel.
I was always told I was pretty smart. I guess it must be because I got into programming at a really young age, but I don't like bragging. Anyways, I've been fascinated by technology ever since I was a kid. My parents entered me into programming competitions and hackathons after I begged and pleaded for weeks, though they weren't sure I'd be able to win any of them. Not because they didn't believe in me, but come on, most of the guys signing up for those tournaments were far older than I was. Still, I would beat the competition and amaze both my folks and those judging the events. I loved it. It was so much fun, and I learned so much. When the iPhone came out, I was amazed by it. Then the App Store was released, and that's when everything changed for me. I began realizing that people got so addicted to those silly little games and how easy it was for them to become popular. So I wondered if I could make one of my own and have people actually enjoy it. It seemed like such a fun way of challenging myself, and so I spent the following 2 months working on an app all by myself. I had my best friends try it out first, and they absolutely loved it. They'd play it for hours at a time and even ask me for advice on how to move forward faster, which I was more than glad to help them with. But as I began asking myself how to actually release it, I realized there was a major problem with my plan, and that was my age. You see, I was 12 at the time, and I couldn't publish any app under my own name, not until I turned 18. I was so bummed at first. I had put so much effort into it, and it was a great product, but no one was going to be able to enjoy it. No one except for my friends, that was, but it didn't feel like enough. I talked to my parents that night, feeling really heartbroken. I explained how hard I had worked on it and asked them, begged them actually, to let me publish it under their names. We discussed the idea for a while, and I could tell they were a bit hesitant at first, but eventually my dad gave me the same smile he offered me when he agreed to let me enter all those hackathons. "All right, son, if you want it that bad, we'll give it a try," he told me, and I knew right then and there that I'd always have my parents' support, no matter how odd my ambitions might seem to them. You have to understand, I was barely more than a teenager, and though I had always been precocious, I was still a child in their eyes. They worried about me and didn't want to expose me to the world too soon, which I understand. Still, they supported my dreams, and we published the app, thinking a few people would fancy it and that it would be a launching pad for me later on in life. Man, we never imagined what would happen next. My game became an overnight hit and almost immediately began paying off. I couldn't believe it. Money was pouring in at thousands a day. Every single hour, more and more people downloaded it. I had never felt happier before. The reviews were so positive, and my parents were gleaming with pride. The absolutely best part, though, was being able to give the money to my parents. You see, I come from a working-class family. My folks had to struggle to buy me just about anything we owned, and yet they always tried to give me the absolute best. They paid for my extracurricular lessons to encourage me always to keep learning, and I was so thankful for all their effort. I wanted to give them back a bit of everything they had done to me through my life, and that felt so rewarding. Eventually, the craziest thing happened. A big company contacted my father, who was supposed to be the game's creator. He called me into the living room that night and let me know about the offer that had been made to him. I couldn't believe it. It was more money than I even imagined ever earning, over $1 million, and I was just a 12-year-old kid. The offer did seem too good to be true, but my dad made sure it wasn't some kind of scam, so we discovered that the business was absolutely legit. Of course, we accepted immediately, and my father told me how proud he was of me and how we'd save up most of it for my future. I'd be able to go to my college of choice and get myself an apartment when I was old enough to live on my own. Of course, I agreed with all of that, but I also wanted to help my family, and I was finally able to do it before I even turned 13. My life absolutely changed after that, and that game truly became my launching pad to a better, more successful life. It just happened far before any of us would have imagined, and I know none of it would have been possible without my parents' unconditional support and love, so I'll always be indebted to them. Being smart is great, but nothing beats the encouragement of a loving parent. If you enjoyed my story of how I became a millionaire, don't forget to smash that like button and check out the other stories on the channel. And subscribe so you don't miss the next video.